you keep an eye on this? Thank you very much. Just, yeah.
Yeah, but where is the? So can I just pass it? I don't understand. The top. Okay. So I will get my.
Yeah, we have to be selected here.
You can have it because.
Does that make sense?
I will call you if the.
It's blinking. What does blinking mean?
Usually recording.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to FanDuel. My name is Gerard. I work here at FanDuel for 1 year and a half. I can't remember. We do plenty of React stuff. It's really cool. We are hosting now every once in a while the React Edinburgh meetup. Have lots of fun, learn a lot about React. Now Mustafa will introduce, well, he's the one who started all of this, and he's going to introduce Code Your Future.
This is so difficult.
Yeah, so like he mentioned, me and a couple of us here are part of Code Your Future, which is a school that teaches programming to refugees and asylum seekers. We have the main classes in Glasgow, and we have mentors from here in Edinburgh and from Glasgow as well. And today's meetup is actually a special one in a way that everyone, the 5 talks that we have are from mentors or graduates of Code Your Future. We also do the Glasgow JavaScript meetup, and we experimented there with doing opening talks to people who are new to tech and so on. It was a way of getting our students and graduates as well, like the confidence to do talks and throwing them in the deep end, basically. And the first one that we're throwing to the deep end in Edinburgh is one of our graduates, Johannes. They built a graduation project, a progressive web app for Kenning Park Complex, sustainable food map for Glasgow where people can go and map the places you can have locally sourced food and also track habits of your food consumption and so on. One of the 2 graduation projects there. So he will be talking about that. And then we have other talks during the night from other mentors and people involved in Code Your Future. Anything?
Yeah, just to complement, I mean, so that was the first class that just graduated, and the second class started now, so we have plenty of students that are now graduates, and they would love to get introduced to your companies. If you have space for hiring people, that would be really great. Just get in touch with us. And if you'd like to help mentoring, that's also really welcome.
Cool. Let's start.
Yeah, well, leader clap.
You have yours?
Yeah, I have it.
You have another one?
Hi everyone. Good evening. You already finished my presentation, but yeah, we talk about progressive web app. My name is Johannes. I don't want to say it again, but I'm a product of Code Your Future, and Code Your Future is a class for refugee, and we learned the last 6 months JavaScript, HTML, CSS, Node, React, and MongoDB database. Okay, before we start the PWA, let's talk about why we need the progressive web app. If you see this core chart, you can see the app usage is more than, it's much bigger than the web usage, the web usage. So everyone's used the mobile application than the website. But if you see in the world, there is 5 billion devices can access a website in the day. So we have to consider our usage. So why it's much much bigger than the website is the app have more capability than the website, because you can get the push notification, you can get the application on your phone, so it's more engageable and it's more capability. But the website also have a lot of reach than the mobile app, because you don't have to download through the application, the Apple Store or Android, and you can just write your URL and you can use the website. So it have to there is a lot of reach for the website. So that's what we came PWA. The PWA is a user interface. It's get the more advantage of the app, the native app and the website. So it's a combination of both the application and the website. So what's PWA? PWA, it's as I said, it's a user experience that have the reach of the website and the app. So let's see some feature of the PWA. It's progressive. As the name indicates, it's progressive web app, so it's progressive. It's work for every users, regardless of the web browser. And it's fast because it catch the first page. So when you went to the website, it's fast, because in the reality, 53% of the user, if your website is slower than 3 seconds to load, they immediately quiet your website. So we have to consider about how it's fast and how it's respond quickly. And it's engageable. It's feel like a natural app, a native app, and you can get the push notification to push the user to access your website. And it's reliable because they used the HTTPS. It's reliable. Sorry, it's launched from the home screen, and the app never ever shown the dinosaur. That's what we appreciate the PWA, and it's safe. It's used the HTTPS, so it's safe, and it's integrated. It's fit for any devices and any browsers. So this one is what we built for our graduation project. It's a food map for Keating Park Complex, and we built a food sustainability for Glasgow people. They indicate a place, how they get the food, and how they get the drinks and every stuff like in the Glasgow. So if you see here, just put our URL. So we built on PWA. If you put the app, you get this banner, and just you have to add it to the home screen. That's what you have to do. And it gets on the home screen, you get the icon, and when you click it, you see this splash screen, and it's used the full screen like a native app. So it's much integrated with the user. Yeah, this one is some screenshots. So when you went to the URL, you can get that banner for engagement, and it's launched the user from the home screen. You can see the splash screen, and you can work offline. So if you see the progressive web app, the checklist, our application is past 91% of the PWA. uh, because the first one is it have to be in HTTPS. Even if it's redirect from HTTP to HTTPS, but it's fail, so it have to be on the HTTPS. And some viewport, we already fixed that one, but yeah. So we passed the checklist of the PWA. So did you see this one? Anyone? Did you play the game? Yeah, but the main purpose is just remove this one. We don't want to see the dinosaur anymore. That's why we came on the PWA. So the PWA it's catch the first page, so you never see the dinosaur. So how we built? We built by just saying create React app, and by default it gives you the service worker on your app. It's register service worker, and when you run, there is two mode to run your React application. The first one is just a start, npm start. The second one is npm run build dev. So on the build mode and on the start mode. So the difference between both is if you run your application on the local host, you don't have to be on the HTTPS. But if you be on the build mode, it have to be on the HTTPS. And all the magic is working on service worker. So if you see here, you can, as I said, it's catch only the first web page, but after you said React eject, and then if you include these files, it catches everything. So you have to add this function on your code. And also, if you want make it the application, by default it says offline first and network, but if you want to make it vice versa from the network, and you have to include this function. And the problem is it catches only the first page. You have to make it modify to catch every pages. So if you have like more than 100 pages, you have to make it. You have to eject the npm, and you have to make the function. Also, the user always it's backward of. It's the version of it's a backward. If it's updated, he can get the first catch. So that's the disadvantage. And it's only near to the service work on your phone. Also, if you want to remove the service worker, you can just unregister to inject the service worker. To be realistic, Apple doesn't support this PWA. It's only in the debate. It's because of security risk. There is a lot of debate. That's it. Anyone question? Thank you very much.
The next one. don't know how to edit. Hi. So, yeah, the second talk is about React Native. So I've done a couple of talks here and in Glasgow JavaScript about React Native, the basics and so on, and wanted to talk a bit about consideration and some things that happen when you use React Native in production, and specifically about code push. I'm working for a startup called Kindaba, and we have it's an early stage startup. We have a React Native application. It's a private social network for families and people who are aware of their privacy. They don't want to share with big networks, advertisement agencies, and so on. So we built it as um, React Native application to get iOS and Android, and the MVP was released last September. So why React Native? Uh, we talked, had a talk before about why to use React Native in general. These were some of the bullet points that the considerations that you would have normally is that you either do native, Cordova, or React Native. Native, if you have the resources to have two teams and all what that entitles, having two feature set and putting them in parallel, maybe that's definitely the best performance that you would get. But if you're being pragmatic and you want to do more with less people, as in a startup, you would go normally for something like Cordova or React Native or Xamarin or so on. Between Cordova and React Native, the difference that Cordova is a web view and you live in a web view. I've built a Cordova app before, and you do a lot of effort to make it feel like a native one. It's easier to get there with React Native. Performance is better. The development experience is much better. If you're doing something with right to left languages, it's amazing. It's yeah, good. You know how it is. Yeah, I spent a lot of time with doing Arabic websites and stuff, and it's a nightmare. It's if you do right to left languages, it's very hard normally. With this, it comes out of the box, the support for it in the layout engine. It has great tools out of the box support for ES6, and it does the main thing. It does look and feel native um, out of the box without putting so much effort. And this is the closest I've found as to an architecture diagram that the way it works that if I add a React Native button, this will be there will be a React and actually an Android Java implementation of that button and an iOS Objective C of that button. And they are exposed to through a JavaScript API so that you can control it there. And there is the bridge between the two where like if you have your JavaScript code when you're developing, you have a development mode. This is why you can get things like hot reloading and so on because you update your JavaScript and it can be shipped to the app. So it's a combination of having the native elements with your logic in JavaScript that can be in a bundle. Um, and yeah, we a while ago we talked in Kindaba that what we want to achieve as an engineering team, and we basically say we want to develop one of the things that we want to develop, test, and deploy fast and with confidence. Um, and that brings us to how can you achieve that in when you are in production. So hopefully these are all issues that we'll talk about in the future. But yeah, you would want things like having continuous integration and continuous delivery for your mobile app, which it seems like feels a lot of people tend to ignore it, but you need the same thing that you do for backend and other stuff. You need to have ways to manage environments and config and React. Testing was unit testing or an end-to-end automated testing. Android issues that you get is, it's not, in practice you will get issues with Android, even though the premise is that you wouldn't, but you will get issues with Android. Um, and then the one that I will talk about today is over-the-air updates, and specifically Code Push. So Code Push is a cloud service. It enables Cordova and React Native developers to deploy mobile apps directly to their users' devices. So the same architecture that I was talking about, whatever, you have the bit that's the native application, but then you have the logic, and if which is 90% of what you will do in your application after a while. And the same that when you're in development mode, you can get hot reload and so on. Code Push uses the same functionality to update. If you just update your JavaScript code, you don't need to go through a full cycle of releasing to the App Store or to iOS or Android. You can just use Code Push for the users to get an update to their application over there. Um, so the way it works is it's a package that you can install, Code Push CLI, and then you have commands like that. You register, and then you add your app, iOS and Android version there. And then if you say Code Push release React, your app, and Android or iOS, users will get the update next time you can choose when they get it, but they will get basically the update. And then you have also things that like mandatory updates. If you want to force them that there is something crucial, you can just say add a mandatory flag, and the next time they open it, it will be forced the update, and the application will get that. If things go wrong, you can also just roll back to the previous version from Code Push immediately. Um, so this is, yeah, the top benefit. Yeah, if you've done this, you know that the process for going, especially through the iOS store, is painful, and this allows you to ignore that for a lot of what you're doing. I would say for probably 90% of what you're doing after the first bit. And this is the question, I guess, that would be in some people's mind. Does Apple allow this? Apple does allow this. It's in their terms of services that you can use services like Code Push to get over the air update, as long as you don't change the main functionality of the application, and also not to have a pop-up saying that this application got updated. That breaks their terms of services. So if you don't do these two things, you are okay with iOS store, and with Android, it's not a problem anyhow. Um, so beyond the basics of that, of what I showed, is, yeah, in a team you would need people to collaborate on a Code Push, so you can give permission to couple of people to be able to push, to use Code Push, and that you can do that from the CLI. You would want to have multiple environments, so we have a staging version of the app and the production one, and you can do that out of the box with Code Push. By default, the configuration will have staging and production, but you can customize that. They can have different keys and different cycles, and you can promote from one to the other. And it kind of redefines the workflow a bit, that we follow the kind of Git flow process, like you have develop and master, and that's here that master should be always releasable. And this is kind of changes the concept of what's releasable, because you have two ways of thinking about something being releasable. You just do a Code Push, and that's it, or you actually need to go through the store. So in React Native, whenever you need to add a new native functionality, which is the equivalent will be in the code if you say React Native link. So like right now, we were adding SVG support, and that's not something that you get out of the box from React Native. So you have to add a native library, and you have a linking, you have to run React Native link. Whenever you have to say React Native link, that means that the APK or IPA change, and you have to go through the store. But the good thing that's not something that we do quite often. That's most of the changes after a little bit of time are in the JavaScript code, and this you can just get them through code push. For the process, we still, I guess, we're figuring it out because it needs a bit of discipline that we don't put in our develop branch or so on things that will make it not releasable, as in not code pushable, really, unless we make that decision. Uh, the not so good, I think this is the biggest one. It's from Microsoft, and I mean, you love it, but it's even psychologically. I think when we talked about this in the team, the first thing that came up, this is from Microsoft. I don't like it, just period. So yeah, it is from Microsoft, but it's a really good product. It does what it says it would do. But there are caveats, like Microsoft being Microsoft, they already rebranding it, make it part of a bigger thing, App Center. They say it's still gonna be free. It's free now, but the idea is that integrates with other services in App Centers, things like some crash analytics or logging and other services. The services look really good, but they are moving in a slightly different direction now. Um, and then it's too easy as well. So we had, because you can just push things very, very easily, and you can roll back and so on, you tend to just forget the processes that you had before for doing that. So we did, like, when we were in product hunt, a developer, that's me actually, pointed the actual app to product, from production to staging by mistake. And like normally if you should catch that with your process and so on, but again, because it's so easy, it's just like I've done that, and then I realized, oh shit, this is not right, and just rolled back and made a mandatory update, and it worked. So, but yeah, I should still stick to what's the right way of doing things, I guess. Um, the bottom line, use code push, I think, always, if it's a React Native or Cordova app. There is really no reason not to do it. The pain of going through Apple Store and how inconsistent it is sometimes, you literally, if you have experience, you push something that's accepted, and then the same thing next week, they will get someone else reviewing it and telling you that you need to change it. So you lose nothing by having something like code push. And again, after a certain stage in your project, 90% of what will you do will be uh, code pushable. You don't need to have a full APK or IPA. That's it, yeah. I was going to show, before the question, show how it looks like. How can I change this to mirror? So so basically, it's CLI here. If I say code push, the first thing that you would do is code push register, which you will register with your GitHub. And if you say code push who am I, you will see who you are, who are you logged in as. That, with a combination with a key that you get when you register an app, will make it possible to send updates. if I need to release an update, I'll do something like this: code push release React, the name of the application that we have and the platform that we have, and that will create an update and send it. Um, if I look at the history of the staging environment, if I have internet, yeah, so these are all updates that we did. So there is the app version. This is the actual APK one that needs to go to the store, 1.7.3. And then all of the other the updates are code push updates that you can apply on the fly to this user. So you can see how many, you can see that, yeah, we can do quite often the updates for code push. If I look at the prod one, you can even see how many people have which version, the active one, people who installed it or not. And to get it working now, it's, I used it a while ago, but now it's, and it was quite easy, but now it's really as easy as just having, it's a higher order function that you can wrap it around your components in React Router in our case, and you can give it here these options when to check for an update. So it can be on app resume, it can be on app start, or it can be on restart of the device, and you can tell it the install mode. Is it when you the next suspend, or when it's restarting the app? So you can define those. And when you say it's a mandatory one, then it forces it to do install immediately. So there are modes to do that, and that's it. You just need to use that import code push and use it, wrap your component around it. That's a higher order function. And if it fails to connect to code push server or anything, everything just functions normally. That's it. That's code push. So, yeah. Question.
So from understands, going on the Play Store, on the App Store then. So
Yeah.
how does a user download the app? Do you provide it on your website, or how do you?
So they get it the first time from the store, but then all the updates afterwards
Okay.
will be on the fly. So especially when it's illustrated, when you're fixing bugs all the times and so on,
So it's
it's
like
very,
the updates.
yeah, yeah.
Pop-ups.
So this one here, you see this, they will get version 1.7.1 from the store, and then all of these updates, it will be installed on their application on the fly when they open it. Yeah,
All right. Thanks.
yeah,
And then if you have native changes, that becomes 1.7.2, and then that goes
yeah,
to the App Store, and all the updates.
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
What? Sorry? So Expo, if you're using Expo, Expo has a similar service from it, like from out of the box. Um, Amazon has this mobile center kind of equivalent, and it has a service that's supposed to be doing this, and I couldn't get it. I couldn't get anything to work on that service. But Code Push seems to be that people are using, either if you're using Expo, they're using the Expo service. If you're not using Expo, Code Push seems to be the default nowadays.
I like the name.
Yeah. No, actually, yeah, it's in the background. It just happens. So when you, I have a problem with my emulator. I wanted to show it, but basically what you would get with these settings that I have for this, when you open it, when there is an update, it will download the update, but it will not apply it. And then the next time, in this case, on next suspend, or it will apply that update. So it's seamless. They don't notice anything. If you put it a mandatory, if you flag it as mandatory, then it will force a restart on the app. So like in the case when I changed the server thing, we did a mandatory one, and yeah, it will be more noticeable, but it will restart the app. They open the app, it restarts itself, and it shows. But yeah, but it's normally the normal flow is seamless. There is nothing. Actually, if you put a pop-up, that breaks the iOS store terms of services. So if you want to put a pop-up saying that there is an update, have code that says this is if OS equal Android. So do it only for Android. Don't do it for that. Uh, that's fine for Android, yeah. And the payload that you will get from the code push service can have also a description, kind of a release notes if you want, like what was updated, and that you can put somewhere in your like about page or something like that if you'd like. Sorry? No, it's free. It's free. Like I said, now it's moving to Mobile Center. I think there will be other parts of Mobile Center will be for money, but they say that code push will remain free. But to be honest, like it's one of the things that I would pay for, I think. Well, if it's reasonable money. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have to consider, sorry, do you have to consider what you are changing?
Yeah.
Changing that it's not native, but if you change major functionality, that's essentially a greatly change for some users.
Yeah, so, well, if you're changing functionality and you want to be following the rules of terms of services, you should have a new APK or IPA done. But technically speaking, you can still do it through code push. What we consider mostly, and it's easy to flag, is that if we're adding a native functionality. So basically things like, in our case, will be, I don't know where the best place. So packages that don't come by default, they are normally the ones that start with React native, so like intercom, image picker. They are things that are native. They have a native part to them, and then you have to say React link when you use them. So this is the main thing that we consider, that if we do that, we know we cannot use code push. But for the functionality itself, no, I think anything that's in the logic, the JavaScript part, and so on, it's just normal development workflow. Yeah.
Does code push know that it can't push changes like that, or is it up to developers to decide that's a native change, I should probably go to the App Store?
It wouldn't know, no. So you could,
but you'd be breaking the rules.
yeah. Yeah, no, it will, if you do that, basically what you will do, you will get a JavaScript error because you updated the JavaScript. JavaScript will be importing some native functionality. You will get a crash in your app if you do that. Yeah. So because you will be importing something that depends on a native part, but the native part is not in the application when it's loaded. Yeah.
So it's really only possible to update the JavaScript code.
Yeah. But that's literally 95% of what we do. It's very rare that you add a new native library after a while. Yeah.
Any kinds of application that would be so dependent on, I mean, this works for you with your application, but do you think this would be unsuitable for anyone, or should everyone?
I think, I mean, you will not lose anything. Once you have a new native functionality, you link it, and then after that you can keep using code push after. I think the question would be like, if you reach a point where it's not usable for you, probably React Native as a whole is not good enough for you. And there are cases where React Native wouldn't be. If you have a very funky, like Spotify user interface, for example, probably React Native is not a good fit from the start. But I won't stop using it because I'm adding new native libraries or so on. First of all, that should settle. If it's not settling at some point, then your app must be like just going in all directions. Something bigger is wrong with your app. And then also, yeah, if you hit that point, I think just React Native is not suitable, which is, it is the case for some application. It's not it doesn't fit everything. Yeah.
I've never really dealt with the App Store much, but how do you keep your version numbers in check if you're bumping versions out with the App Store?
So there is here. So there are a couple of mods for React Native. You can use now export create React Native app, and that has a bit that handles that. There is a build Gradle file for the Android, so it's a Android Java build, which you can bump the version of it. And then in Xcode, you can do with, I think you can change the, what is it, the plist file or something to change the version. So that's the way to do it manually. If there are tools that helps with doing that, so there's Fastlane. So that's what I was like saying, maybe a future talk when we actually implement it. Fastlane is a tool that helps with, it's almost like, what is it called? The build helper for Node, like one of these tools that help you build projects and so on. What is it that you guys use in Tesco Bank? Come on. So it's a helper. It just have helper functionality. Instead of bumping the version manually, you can just run a command. It compiles the release version that has some differences. On top of it, it also can bump the version for you, do things like that. So using something like Fastlane and something like the CI service, there are a couple of them that are very good with React Native applications. Yeah. But,
yeah, and so those manual changes are handled by you, but then code push handles its own. If you look at that,
yeah.
that table, handles its own V1, V2, V3, which are the actual code push versions. So they're separate from the actual App Store version.
Yeah.
So like version 1.7.1 will have several code push versions. So 0, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are all automatically handled by code push.
Yeah. So the version of that one that is highlighted will be 1.7.1 v4. It's like a minor version there. Cool. That's it. Yeah.
Can you limit the code push updates in terms of bandwidth the same way that you limit with a native app, for example, saving depending on the network? If it's not a mandatory update, can you configure it, for example, like saying take it when you have a nice network and don't overuse it?
No, you can't do that. I guess what will happen is that because the download happens seamlessly, it will try to download. If it's not finished, it will just not apply it. But there is no configuration to say download it only if not out of the box at least. You'll have to add some logic. So with React Native to try to detect that it's a slow connection or something like that. But there is no configuration out of the box. It has, I mean, the extra configuration, it has some stuff to do with A/B testing. You can roll out to part of your like user base and so on, but that doesn't exist. I didn't see something to do with bandwidth. Yeah.
It's down to the user to select background updates.
Yeah, I don't.
So I guess that means if you're on mobile network instead of Wi-Fi, you'd still get the update.
Yeah, so yeah, no, but you can add logic to say when to update the page. So now I showed you the easiest way to do this, which is using the high order function, wrap it around your component. But you can be imperative about calling code push. So you can say code push call and check if there are things and then install them. You can have code that does that. And if you wrap that code around a check for connectivity or check for anything or for speed or so on, you can do it. Yeah.
For users on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you can check that, but you have to do. It's not something that you would do from the CLI directly. It's logic that you have to add. Yeah.
How big are the JavaScript updates? Because I guess you're not pushing access to
It's I think I guess it's about 300K, something like that. So it's not big. It's minified. It's not a massive thing. Yeah, and it's a big application now. So, yeah. Cool. Cheers. Thank you, guys. Can you? So one other thing that we've done in JavaScript, Glasgow JavaScript, is we started having talks not 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 JavaScript related, not React related, but React like this. So and that worked very well.
They forgot to give 5 minutes to go to the toilet.
Do you want to enforce that before he actually starts?
It's kind of already started, isn't it? Should I? I'll give it a try. I'll go and talk to them. Sorry. What if we give people 5 minutes to go to the toilet?
Yeah. 5 minutes break. So like, if you
Yeah.
wanna.
If you want to go to the toilet or like breathe. How are you?
Good. What about you?
Would you like a beer? I cannot offer like global, but
Yeah, I think
family and friends.
I think I'm okay.
You sure?
I might fall asleep if I drink a beer.
Okay. Do you, Miguel?
I'm fine, thanks.
Cool. I did a code push. It's quite cool.
Yeah, it seems interesting.
I had heard that you could do this, but I had never like heard you explain more. It's quite cool.
Yeah, I haven't done too much with React Native.
Just start doing something with React Native. Haven't tried.
Yeah, it's really cool. We want in FanDuel to start sharing views with React Native and React. We plan to build, this is super ambitious, but we plan to build our own abstraction layer on top of React, so we can aim to divs or views and literally use the same components. And it's like, so cool. But yeah, we haven't started. Yes. Yes.
Mainly use React here for the front end.
Here, well, React and Angular and PHP and Python. And the cool part is React, because the new part, but there's like all this legacy. Every time someone tried to kill the legacy, just introduce a new layer and never really kill the legacy. React, yes, React is doing quite a good effort. We've killed some parts, like for real. We've reduced the code from the past, but it's hard to convince the business. You know what? I'm not going to produce anything new for the next 3 months. Yeah. So, what about Visor? It must be all React. How's the code base?
Spot or
They have
bit
the guest network here.
You can connect to my
Or
hotspot,
connect to phone
yeah.
if you like, yeah.
hotspot. It's the Moto G Cabarossi. So what do you call it?
Alright, I can check it on Keychain. I have it on Keychain.
React Edge. grab a Coke.
Yeah. So all my pals, basically, okay, because it's the only thing I ever talk about. Is everyone who here knows what a peer-to-peer network is? Okay, well, I will describe it, and I can hear myself in this laptop. What's the mute shortcut in a Mac, anyone?
The mute button is like F10-ish.
Test. I will just tolerate hearing myself. So, so I'll explain what Scuttlebutt is, roughly how it's implemented, and why you would want to make such a thing. So, Scuttlebutt is a social network, but unlike Facebook and Twitter, where there is a central server, like in the left here, or well, in reality a bunch of servers, but you know, logically one server in the middle. In a peer-to-peer network like Scuttlebutt, there is no client or machine that has special status in the network. So in a centralized model like Facebook or Twitter, the machine in the middle is, its role is when you log into the website to return the posts of your friends and allow you to post, and then when you log in, you'll see those posts. But in Scuttlebutt, you connect to any machine you can in any way possible. So that might be on a local Wi-Fi network, in time over Bluetooth on your phone, and perhaps over radio, which is an ambition of mine, but I don't even have a radio license yet, so, but in time. So the responsibility of each computer on the Scuttlebutt network is to store the feeds or posts of yourself, your friends, and their friends, so you can view the network offline and you can see most of your social network, and they gossip post each other to help each other catch up. So there's no sign up. When you start a Scuttlebutt client for the first time, the most popular is called PatchBay. It generates a public-private key for you. Some of you may have used these to SSH to machines, or to verify that a Git commit you've made is yours when pushing to GitHub, that sort of thing. So when you post a message to the network, you sign it with your key to prove that it was you that made it, so that you can't forge the messages of people to pretend they said nasty things about your friends. And it's open source, so it's built by volunteers, and there's some grant money now. Now, why would you want to build a network in this way? There's two main motivations. The first is freedom of speech. So in cases of political turmoil, often a government that's under protest will immediately shut down access to social networks like Facebook, and there's countless examples in the news. So a network with this architecture, there are no intermediate servers to shut down, as long as computers can talk in some way. Oh, okay. Okay, it's fine. Then you will be able to share messages with your friends. So an ideal version of this would be perhaps a bunch of mobile phones in the same area talking over Bluetooth with catching each other up in messages. And freedom of listening is like the inverse principle. It's the idea that you should be able to choose what content you see, how you see it. So a big complaint about Facebook and Twitter these days is that the content you see is mediated by algorithms that are optimized to make you click advertisements and not necessarily show you what you want to see. So because Scuttlebutt is just a protocol that anyone can implement, you can implement your own client and it can let you see the data you want to. You can block users. You can, in the future, perhaps share lists of users to block amongst friends, that sort of thing. And it's perhaps the most important thing, it's ready for the zombie apocalypse. So in a situation where we have no grid of electricity or internet, we could perhaps imagine 2 base camps with a zombie infestation in the middle. And base camp 1 has a petrol generator where they charge all the laptops and have a Wi-Fi hotspot, and they all talk to each other over Scuttlebutt and it gossips over the network. But they want to communicate some military plans to base camp 2 so that they can defeat the zombie infestation. So someone puts a laptop in their backpack, dons their machine gun, and runs across no man's land to a camp with a similar setup. And all the messages that the other camp has yet to see gets gossiped around between the machines, and that way they can communicate. If your software doesn't have a plan for the zombie apocalypse, you're doing it wrong. Rethink your architecture. And the same principle applies to Mars colonization. It's the same. You beam messages like 20 minutes latency, and a machine at the other side of Mars keeps up to date with a bunch of messages and they all talk. That way you don't have to wait like 20 minutes for a HTTP request. So now I'm going to show you what a couple of the clients look like. So this is Patchwork, which is perhaps the most popular at the moment. No, it's not. What is going on here? Oh, wait. Oh, my web browser crashed. That's what happened. I'm going to free up some memory. Again, this is what happens when someone starts up with an ancient laptop. Arch Linux and a VGA cable. Chrome is loading and my hard disk has like a 30-second latency because it's old. I'm in the appeal.in, but hello. Good. Okay. This is not how an average user would start up the application, but this is how big nerds like me do. Yeah. It should appear shortly. It's just, there we go. Oh, that's me. That's in my screen. Yep. I'm too scared to close that in case something bad happens. Okay, so like a traditional social network, we have a timeline of posts, and it's just ordered, what's the word? Like, in time received, like it used to be in the good old days of Facebook and Twitter, but in the future you can imagine a client getting more algorithmic and putting the user in control. So this is my profile and all the friends I have, and who follows and who follows me, what you'd expect really, but this thing in the middle here is a bit more subjective. unlike traditional social networks, you can subjectively assert something about someone's identity. So people have asserted that my name is Gordon or Gofton because I'm a big goth apparently. So people by default will see what I've assigned myself, but you can choose to see what someone else has assigned. Here they've also assigned me Picard because I like Star Trek. But there's because Scuttlebutt is just a protocol, there's other clients. About 4 others come to mind at the moment. One that I've did some work on is, again, normal users wouldn't start it like this, is Patch Bay. And my hard disk is incredibly slow. Wow. So Patch Bay is kind of, there's more experimentation going on in Patch Bay at the moment. For example, someone built a book review app and kind of like Goodreads, and I built a chess app so that you can play chess with your friends in the zombie apocalypse, which I'm quickly preparing for. Oh, wow. Sorry. I've got 5 more minutes, right? Okay, so the Scuttlebutt protocol is capable of transmitting any arbitrary JSON payload as a message. So I can post to my timeline that I make a chess move, and this way you can build up a game, like just move after move. So I post pawn e4, my friend posts like pawn d4, and that way we have a message thread that underneath is just a thread of move messages. Michael, what should I move? In the room somewhere. Oh, yeah. Or maybe he went away. Well, I'm just gonna. So that just, I'll show you what the raw message for that looked like. So that is just a message with the content. The type of this message is chess move, it's move number 8. Root is the game ID, which is just the original game invitation message. And the square I clicked was e5 and I clicked d4. And Fen is just a representation of the game state as it is after that move. And PGN moves just how players represent it when they're recording games. So yeah, that's good fun. Gatherings in the top right would just be like Facebook style events, which is useful. And this is our book review app that I quite like. So it is a very flexible protocol. Anyone can, its base level is just a way of replicating a database between clients, and the primitive is like a feed, like the messages you post, like your Facebook or Twitter timeline, and on that you can post anything. A client just knows how to render that JSON payload. So in that primitive we've got like normal messages, event gatherings, books, and chess. There's even a GitHub alternative that I'll quickly show you. So you have issues and pull requests, but the difference is that it's decentralized, so it's just in everyone's laptop, and you can interact with it exactly like git commit and git push, etc. So one thing I'm excited for that's upcoming is the mobile app. It's in alpha at the moment, It's mainly been developed by a guy called Andrew Stoltz, who some of you might know from RxJS fame, I guess, or CycleJS. So look out for that. It's built in React Native, which is where the tangential part in relation to React comes to in this talk. So it's native React, and it's been a long, difficult task porting some of the core infrastructure stuff over. So I thank him for that effort. So that's me. Any questions?
How do you build that client? Like, you use Electron?
Yeah, so it's an
some kind of SDK to JavaScript?
yeah, so Electron is a way of displaying HTML and CSS and JavaScript in a native application, basically. So one of the clients at the moment is you spin up a web server and interact with it through the browser, and there's some experimentation going on and moving it over to Firefox as like a plugin or that, but there's some challenges in porting the database model over and that sort of stuff. But yeah, Electron and React, hello.
So how big would be the database?
I will show you.
You and your friends and
Yeah. So the SSB folder's where everything lives, and that secret file that you'll see shortly is my identity. So if I shared that with any of you, you could pose as me, basically. But so there's this 445 Flume is 445 megabytes worth of textual messages, and I'm using a client that reaches out further in the network. So normally you only see friends and friends of friends, but I'm using a client that sees friends, friends of friends, and friends of friends of friends, so 3 hops. But there's my total folder size is 3 gigabytes, and the rest of that is images and Git repositories that are shared, and there's even an npm alternative built into it, so you can share like JavaScript libraries over this without a central server. So like I'm a power user, so I see quite a lot. The images and binary files are easier to get rid of, but the messages at the moment you have to keep track of everything your friends have said and pass those about. But like 445 megs isn't that much worse than like the Facebook cache in your mobile phone, so I'm happy with that for now, and if there are challenges we'll solve it. Yep. Oh, so there's a website, scuttlebot.nz for New Zealand, and there's a getting started guide here. Onboarding is a fairly painful experience at the moment, to some extent, and it's something that some people are trying to solve, and some grant money should help with that. But basically, you download patchwork, and then if you were on the same network as me while you had patchwork, my laptop would start telling yours about all the messages it knows about, and you could follow me at that point. But usually that's not how people will be online. Normally, you need a pub in the middle. So a pub is like a robot friend. It's a client like any other, but when you follow it, it'll follow you back, and that way you can see anyone that's friends with that pub. And as you follow more people, you'll connect to more nodes and get share messages with them. Yeah. Like your client is in control of what it sees and what it does. People can block you, but that's about it. I've only encountered maybe 2 trolls so far, and they have like 10 people on the blocked list. But yeah.
So correctly that if you want to friend a person that is not a friend of your friend of your friend, then it's just, you just not see him.
Yeah, so it's different. Like there was someone that attends the Glasgow JavaScript meetup, and I was in a situation for a while where he thought I was ignoring him because we didn't have a friend in common, or rather, he had someone who was following me, so he could see my messages, but I wasn't following someone who was following him, so I couldn't see his messages. So 3 months later, I followed someone that, well, made it all made it all work, and I was like, suddenly I see this list of private messages, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, but so really you have to arrange it in a way that you have a friend in common, and the easiest way to do that is to use the same pub. But there's a way to generate invites at the moment that's quite cool, but it's not really out for wider public consumption yet. But the main takeaway is have a friend in common, and sometimes that has to be like a robot friend. Yes. Yeah, it's meant to map real social relationships. Like I know Mozafar, who knows Mimi, who knows Rarish, and like the idea is like as you follow more people and widen your view of the network, then with shared interests you're likely to see people.
How do you follow the pub?
Yeah, so so step one, download, and then there's a list of there's a list of pub servers, and then yeah, like onboarding could be easier. So you go to a pub server and it gives you an invite code that you damn hard disk. But there's a bit you click join pub at the top left and you paste your invite code, and then it tells the pub, hey, I want to be friends. It befriends you, and it tells you about all the messages it already knows about from its friends.
So could any user presumably have an invite code, or is it?
Yeah, any user can run a pub, and some pubs you don't even have to click give me an invite code. It just has a public invite code that you can use. So yeah, this rather interestingly named pub 1.but.nz, you could just paste this in as your invite code. Well, including the 8 after the colon. In fact, the whole thing, yep, that would be what you'd post into Patchwork. But really, like, if you're interested, talk to me and give me your email address, and I'll make sure you get on okay. But that guide should be enough. But you know, for now, early development. Anyone else? Oh. Thank you. Microphone. Rubbish.
Do you want it mirrored or?
Yeah.
I don't know why I was.
Mirrored, yeah, so I can see this.
So like, do you have notes?
Yeah, that'll be.
No.
No. I don't have any notes. Should I have had notes?
No,
Is
depends
this
on you.
okay? Do you need notes?
No, I really like.
Do you have?
Do you have the cool animations, or you took them out after?
I do have the cool
Oh,
animations.
good. Then you don't need
Is this a keynote, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah, take it over.
Cool. All right. Hello, Meetup. Who's heard about observables? Has anyone heard about them? Have you used them? Have you wrote any code with them? Or no? Okay. Well, that's perfect, right? Because this talk is mostly about, it's not about how observables work. It's why I think they make so much sense for client apps that just are based on events, just constant asynchronous events, user events, and so on. Right, so first of all, a bit about me. So my name is Raresh. You can also call me Chris if that's too hard to say. That's the name I use at Starbucks when I buy coffee, because I like to avoid awkward situations. I'm a front-end developer. I work on a high-frequency trading application, and I've been doing RxJS for the past 2 years. So I really, really like it, and especially for the app I'm working on, I think it makes so much sense, and you'll see why. I'm also a mentor at Code Your Future. You probably heard about that. Right, so what is RxJS? Well, the name comes from reactive extensions for JavaScript, but to be honest, it's mostly a library of functions. So think like Lodash. Lodash, just install Lodash. It's a library of functions you can use to operate on arrays. And the style of programming you use is event-based functional programming. We'll see what that means in a bit. But what is an observable besides something that you can't observe? Well, think about promises. So who knows what a promise is? Okay, not everyone raised their hand. So promise is, like the name said, it's a guarantee. So it's a JavaScript object. So it's a guarantee that that object will resolve to a value that you need in the future. So think about, for example, when you go to Five Guys, you make your order, and you don't get the burger back immediately. You just get a receipt, and then you have to wait for a few minutes for your order to be ready. So that receipt is basically your promise that something will come. So in terms of that, so like a promise, an observable can be async. So an observable can give you a value at some time in the future. I'll talk a bit about the differences, but a promise can only give you one value. An observable can give you no value, one value, or multiple values. So in terms of that, it's like an array as well. Right, so what's the differences between an observable and a promise? Well, promises are eager. So the moment you create a promise, whatever it has to do, if you call fetch, for example, the moment you call fetch, it's going to go ahead, make that web request immediately. While observables are lazy. So as you'll see, you can just build up your observable. You can attach all these operators to it. You can define it. You can create an instance of your observable. But nothing will happen until somebody actually cares about the value that that observable gives. So you set up your observable, but until it has at least one observer listening to it, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to make any request, nothing. Also, promises are not cancelable. So the moment a promise fires, it will resolve at some point in the future. You will need to have some special logic in your promise callback just to throw away the value if you don't care about it anymore, but it will resolve. While with an observable, you have that method called unsubscribe, but basically, if the numbers of observers goes back to 0, so if suddenly nobody cares about that observable or what value it gives, it just tears itself down. All the event listeners disappear, any network request coming back will be ignored, all of that is handled for you. And in terms of the differences between like observables and array, again, like I said, it's almost like Lodash as well. So you have all of those array methods, map, filter, reduce. You also have map, filter, reduce on an observable, right? Because an observable gives you multiple values. So you can map each value, or you can filter for the values as well. So you can use that analogy as well. let's actually see some code. Let's actually see how it looks like. On the left, let's have some, I don't know, let's have some requirements. So let's say we want to log all the button clicks. On the left, you have how you do it with just pure JavaScript. On the right, it's RxJS. So that thing you see there, observable from event, that's how you create an observable. And ignore the subscribe for the moment. If you were to create a new variable and assign it that observable from event, again, it would not do anything. It would not attach any event to any DOM object, as opposed to the left there, where the moment you declare that code, that event will be attached. Now, you have that subscribe. That subscribe is similar to promise.then. So when you do a subscribe, it does two things, right? One is you can pass it a callback where you'll start receiving values from that observable. In that case, that EV object, that's going to be every time that observable gives me a value, pushes to me a value, I'm going to receive it in that function. And it also starts up the observable. So you can imagine, I'm subscribing here in line, right? But you can imagine subscribing sometime later. And only when you subscribe, that's when all the event handlers will be created. Let's make something more complex. Let's say we want to log every third button click now. That's how you do it on the left. With an observable, let's make some space there. So let's make some space between from event and subscribe. You have this operator. It's a function, buffer count of 3. I just love those cheesy animations, by the way. I love Keynote because of that. But yeah, so buffer count, what buffer count does is you can imagine like a bowl, right? So from event, we'll keep dropping values into the bowl, into buffer count. And buffer count will wait to the count of 3. When it receives 3 values, only then it will release them to the subscribe block. So that's why it's going to wait for 3 clicks. And only after 3 clicks, we're going to get our callback in the subscribe. Let's do something else. Let's do, what if we want to wait 1 second before logging every third button click? Again, it's starting to get pretty insane on the left there. It's starting to get pretty hard to read. With our RxJS, we make some more space in there. And the cheesy animation later, we have the delay operator. So the delay operator, again, you can imagine it as another bowl added to our bowl stack, where you get values being dropped from event into buffer count. When buffer count gets 3 values, it releases them, but now it drops them into the delay operator. The delay operator is another bowl that waits 1 second, and only then it drops them into the subscribe, right? And the final thing is, another big difference between these two is if you suddenly wanted to stop caring about clicks, on the left it would be a bit hard because you have to take a reference to that event listener, you have to know what the event name is, so you have to keep track of all of those. And it becomes even harder if you have multiple event listeners in there. With RxJS, you can just set up your observable however long the chain is, and you can just call unsubscribe. So that subscribe function returns you an object with an unsubscribe function. You can just call unsubscribe, and then everything that was in that observable gets torn down. Like all the event listeners, all the delays, right? So delay has a timer. So even, let's say we have a delay of 10 seconds. If we unsubscribe before the 10 seconds is up, we're not going to get the value. That timer will completely disappear. Right. Now let's actually build something really, really useful. So like if you're a cat, right, and you move to a new city, and you want to meet similar cats with similar interests, you're stuck, right? Like there's no app for that. So how about we build something with that? Oh yeah, if you want to know what the stretchy leg thing is for a cat, just speak to me after. It's a really funny video, like some really, really funny videos. I call it cat tender. So how do we start? Well, all the code that I'm going to be showing, so I'm going to be posting a link to StackBlitz. StackBlitz is this online editor which I used to build this. And all of the code is code that I actually used that makes the app really function. So I haven't simplified the code for this presentation. It's actually, I want to point out how declarative and readable observables can be. So let's say we have an API from Reddit. So we want to load the URL, we want to get 100 URLs for cat pictures. Well, let's imagine HTTP has a get method which returns you an observable. And that observable will give you a value back whenever that response came back. So all we're doing there, basically, we call HTTP get subscribe. Whenever we do response console log response, we're going to get something of that shape. So a response can have multiple children, and each children will have its own URL. So that's the first thing we want to do. Next thing we want to do is we want to extract the image URLs from that. So ignore what's happening inside that map function. But what I want to point out is that I have to use a map function, which is basically anytime we get a response back from the get, it's going to be passed through that map function, which is going to do some transformations on it based on the code in there. And it's basically returning me just an array of just the URLs, because we don't care about all of the extra metadata around it. We just want to get back just a simple array of cat image URLs. The next thing we want to do is we want to load that URL. So we get an array now. We want to load one of the URLs into an image element. Imagine we have that image element. We want to load whatever URL, whatever image that URL is pointing to into that image. So we're going to extract that into an observable. Let's call it catpig URLs. So so that's the thing. Now we can stop caring about what's in there, what's in that rectangle. We can just say catpig URLs, subscribe, and then whatever URL, we can pick the first one, URLs of 0. We can pick the first one and just assign it as the source for the image. So now we have something. That's all we need to build something like this. So that's all it does, right? But we could have done this with promises as well. Now let's move on to observables. So on each click, we want to move to the next image. How do we do that? Well, observables are very declarative like that, and you can compose them. So you can think of, okay, I need an observable that gives me clicks back. So that's what I'm going to build. I'm going to build something called clicks that, again, I'm going to use from event, which is going to give me, whenever I click on the image, it's going to give me an event back. Now, what do I need? Like that, knowing just about the clicks is not very useful for me. I would more care about an observable that gives me indexes instead. So remember how we have that big list of URLs? We want actually some indexes that tell us which one of those URLs to load, to show. So we build something like that. So we build an observable that starts with clicks, and then we use the scan operator. What the scan operator does is you can imagine it as like a reduce. So it's an accumulator function. We start with the value 0. And then whenever we get a new click into here, it's going to increase that by 1. So all that observable does is it starts from 0. I click again, it gives me 1. I click again, it gives me 2. So I can use those as indexes for which image to load. But there is a small problem with this in that we do have to wait for the first click to actually get an index back. Well, we don't want to do that. We want to start with the index 0 and then start listening for further clicks. No problem. RxJS has a start with operator. So you just say, give me the value 0 immediately back, and then start listening to whatever's above you. And we also have to start from 1 in the scan now. So what we've done with this is we can just add it below this catpic URL. So again, I'll introduce another operator. This is the hardest part about RxJS, just all these operators. But again, you get a list of URLs back. And then once you get your URLs back, what switchmap does is it switches, like the name implies, to another observable, right? So imagine it like on the train tracks. The train goes on one track, you switch, it goes to a different track. I don't know if that's a good analogy. But yeah, go with it. So you get your URLs back, and then once you get your URLs, then you want to start listening to, okay, now I care about index changes. So whenever I get a new index, so I'm going to get 0 initially. Then I'm going to get 1, 2, 3 whenever the user clicks. Whenever I get a new index, I want to get the URL for that index. And then I'll just load in the URL in there. Right, so now it's starting to look like something. Okay, let's build the final and most important part, which is you need the swipes, right? In Tinder, you need the swipes. So because Rx is so declarative, it starts to get close to the English language. It starts to get closer to the actual requirements. So this is what's called thinking reactively, and like when you start working with observables, you're going to start seeing this. So we can start taking some requirements. So when a touch starts, basically on the screen, we want to take the initial position of that touch event. And then we want to listen for move events on the screen. And when do we want to stop? We want to stop listening for move events when a touch end event occurs. At that point, we want to take that last value. So we have the last position and the first position. And then we just want to compare. Is this one bigger than this one? Or is this one smaller than the first one? If it's bigger, then it's a like. It's a swipe right or left. Otherwise, it's a dislike. OK. So I've color-coded the sentences on how we can actually start implementing this. So let's go for the first one. When a touch starts, take the initial X value. So we create a new observable for touch start events. And again, we use the map operator. So that the event that comes back from the from event is just a normal DOM event. So we can just extract the X position of that. What's the other one? We want to listen for touch move events. Again, we create another observable that gives us move events. We use the switch map again. So we want to say, start listening for touch events. Whenever you get a touch event, immediately start listening to move events. So that's what we're doing with the switch map. When do we want to stop? Well, until the touch ends. Well, there's another operator in RxJS, of course, that's called take until. So we want to take move events until we have a touch end event. But now there's a problem, because we're just going to, as touch moves happens, we're going to keep getting events, right? Because for every pixel that the finger moves on the screen, we're just going to get an event, an event, an event. We're going to get we can get hundreds of events in there. So we don't care about all of those events. We only care about the last one. So how do we get the last event? Again, thinking reactively and translating that into observable operators, you have a take last operator. So what take last does is it waits. It's like a ball that, again, it just ignores whatever values falls into it until it gets a complete event from its source observable. So when it gets a complete event, it says, OK, what was the last value that dropped into my ball? OK, I'm just going to use that. So we take the last value, and again, we extract the X position from it. So now we have the initial X and the final X. So now we just have to calculate. If the last X is bigger than the initial X, then it's a like. Otherwise, it's a dislike or a false value. Right, so now all that observable does is we don't have to care about it. Now we've built it. We can stop caring about what it does. We just know that whenever we subscribe to likes in there, we're going to get true or false events at different points in the future. We don't have to care how that happens, where it happens, how it's built. We just know that when we subscribe to like, we're going to get those events. OK? So now it's doing something. Now we actually have the move events. We can swipe right, we can swipe left, and we get different images based on that. And finally, let's just glue it all together. Remember how we had the clicks initially? So you had to click on an image for it to actually change. Well, now we have that likes observable. So why don't we use that? Just switch from clicks to likes. And again, it's just going to give us true or false values, and it's actually going to move to the next image now whenever we switch from it. So what do we have now? It's the final product. And you can go to that link. So if anybody wants to try it out on their phone right now and see how badly an app can be made, they can just go to that link and swipe left or right and look at pictures of cats. Oh, and the final announcement, a position just opened up last week in my team. So we are hiring. So anyone who would like to work on a complex app that runs on like mobile, laptop, the desktop, and they would like to solve interesting problems with JavaScript or RxJS, just come and speak to me. You don't have to know RxJS. We can teach you. So yeah, thank you very much. Any easy questions? I stole your joke, Johannes. Okay.
How do you do unit testing that? Is it like that logic for
Yeah.
swiping to be easier to test?
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So the guys that built RxJS, they have a unit testing suite, and it's called marble testing and marble diagrams. So all you do is you just write a string, and you just write dashes. So a dash means a pause, like a tick in time, and then you can say A, and then a few more dashes, and then B, that means another value, and then you can say a vertical line. That means it completed. So that's how you define how you expect your observable to behave. Right? So it is pretty cool in terms of that. Cool. Any more?
How would you describe the learning curve in your experience?
It's
quite difficult to start with, but then it probably gets easier.
Yeah. I guess that thing of like thinking reactively, like, okay, what's a switch map? What do you mean I'm returning another observable from an observable? I mean, all of those things are hard to grasp initially, but once you get the idea behind it, what helped for me is actually building observables, because you think they have like a lot of complicated logic behind them, but when you actually build one, they're mostly just functions. So it's like an object. All of those operators are just objects with a subscribe function on them. Like that's all of RxJS basically reduces down to subscribe. That's the main function in it. Yep.
Do you think the thinking process when you write code for that is similar to like regular functional programming, like Haskell, for example? I don't know if you did any functional programming before this or not.
Yeah, I've not used Haskell, but in terms of that, I think it's in terms of how declarative it is and how you can chain functions like that. I like that part, and it's probably easier if you come, for example, from a functional background. It's probably a lot easier, and you have is Haskell immutable as well? Like, is everything immutable or?
Yeah.
I don't know, but
yeah, because it's like only functions. So
yes,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's also lazy in a way, so it's only evaluates if it's needed to
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yeah. So in terms of that, even pure functions, right? So anything you pass into an operator has to be a pure function. That's why you have things like the scan operator, so you can keep state from one element to the other, because it's really discouraged to use any external state to your observable. So in terms of that, yes, some paradigms are similar.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
How big is the library?
It's pretty big. I don't know the exact size, but basically the focus of RxJS 5 to 6 was learning how to make that smaller, and so you only import the operators you need. So basically, what you can do is they have this new pipe function now in RxJS 5.5, and you just create the pipe function, and then you just pass in only the operators you need into it. So that way you don't have to grab the whole RxJS library. Like everything that you don't need can be tree shaken away. So, because that makes it like you don't, that's the big part, like all of these operators. The core library itself is not big. Like all of these operators are what take up the most space. Yep.
So I guess when you write a new operator, there will be like methods like create, destroy, pass an object. So how many behaviors like this would you have to define to make a new operator?
Yeah, so there's actually a really good helper from RxJS. It's called observable.create. And you get your observer from it. So you get passed in whoever's observing your behavior. And then you can build up your, so observables are still using native DOM events. There's nothing magical behind them. They're still using set timeout, so delay is using set timeout underneath. From event is using add event listener underneath. It's just that they're built using observable semantics. So I guess when you build a delay, for example, you would write your set timeout, and whenever set timeout resolves, you would call observer.next. So what that says is give this value to my observer. Or you could call observer complete, which will tell it, hey, I finished doing all of my work, if you want.
How many of these different behaviors are there that you have to define, or otherwise it would be an incomplete operator?
Yeah, well, you usually have to define so you can only send 3 things to an observer: next, error, or complete. So in promises, you only have the value and the error. In observables, you have one more, so you have the complete as well. So when you create a new operator, you probably have to add behavior for those, like to send those 3 types of events. Cool. Thank you. Is it on that? Or?
No, it's not here.
Okay. I don't know how it works.
We need your microphone.
Wait. Okay.
The observable stuff, I would love to. No, Raj is going to take those. Yeah. So, yeah, it's just a quick show of hands. It's a React meetup, so I'm not going to ask who's used React, but who's used Redux? Even a tiny pet project at all, read the docs. Okay, cool, we're good. We know what we're talking about. Right. Yeah, so hi, my name's Scott. I'm a mentor at Code Your Future. I mostly write Ruby on Rails with JavaScript when I can. A lot of my personal project stuff is in JavaScript and Elixir. And yeah, I work at Cultivate, which is a consultancy in Codebase, just like up the road. Cool. So quickly, before I dive into anything more, Redux for React devs in 30 seconds. So yeah, you'll write React components, and with React, you've got this one-way flow, and you have your state passed down as props. You end up writing this massive state object at the top of your React tree, so that everything can know about everything. This just gets huge. It gets unmanageable. It basically starts having side effects everywhere. Things can modify it, and it's really hard to follow how it's getting changed. You've got set states everywhere. Cool. So what Redux does is it takes that state object and it pulls it out of the top. You basically have your state tree as this thing called a Redux store. It's completely read-only. You cannot, well, you can. It's JavaScript. Everything's possible. It's a read-only store. You should only be using it to by doing a certain thing using actions, which I'll show you in a sec. But basically, what React does is it takes in your store, and it takes in some actions to change the store. They become props, and they go into your components. So this is kind of like all moved out. all your components get props, and your React components become much, much simpler. They can still have state. It's not illegal or anything like that, but you can use it. So Redux words that I might use in here. Actions. Actions are a plain object that contain all the information you need to change the store. Plain object as in like a JavaScript object, usually with a type field. The convention, it's really common. I've never seen it without it. A type, which is like a string that says increment counter. And another one, you could have another action that has an object. It's an object with a type of decrement counter. Typically, you wrap these in Redux with what's called action creators, which are just functions that take arguments and return that object. Make sure that you're always dispatching an action of the same shape. You don't have lots of things like click handlers inside of a React component dispatching their own sort of inline objects and that kind of thing. Cool. So another word that you'll hear me say is a reducer. So a reducer is a function that takes two arguments. One is the current store, and the other one is the action, and then it will return you the new store. This is how you don't mutate the store. Essentially, you copy the entire contents of it, change the bit you want, and then it returns it. Yeah, so lastly, dispatch. So dispatch is a function that your store will expose. Basically, you just pass your actions into a dispatch, and those will get passed to your reducer magically. Typically with React, you'll use a set of bindings, which sort of magically subscribes your store, or your React tree to the store, and then you kind of get your dispatch given to you. Don't worry too much about that. Basically, you need an action to change the store, and you dispatch that action to do that, and it goes through a reducer to change the store. Yeah. So basically, the concept of Redux is that when we dispatch that action, our state tree completely refreshes, or basically gets replaced, and when you rediff with React, the React algorithm will handle and make sure that we don't just replace the entire DOM. That sort of gets magically handled for us, and we can write some really nice code. So, yeah, this seems pretty reasonable. Why would I need to use observables? They seem really cool, but they're really powerful, and this seems quite simple. Right. And yeah, I figured I would put this in after Rarish's talk, because these are pretty cool. When you see them, you think, actually, like, when can I use these? Where can I find a place to use them? So let's have a look at something to async in Redux. This is where it starts to get tricky. So yeah, we'll come to observables in a sec. So basically, your reducer is a pure function. It takes the previous state and an action in the next state. The keyword here is pure. You can't do mutation. You can't do side effects. You can't call it to an API in reducer. In fact, Redux, even if you try, Redux just will ignore it. So we could have an action creator that looks something like this. Our login function, it's going to take an object with a username and password. It's going to return an action with a type of login with a username and password. Right, but 9 times out of 10, in fact, 10 times out of 10, this needs to be async in an app, right? There's no way an app can log in without contacting an API in some way. So you probably want to like maybe stick your Redux request in here. Maybe like try and figure out how I can return multiple actions from one action creator. This won't work. In Redux, this is never going to work. Even if you return this is going to, like in here, you're going to return a promise and try and dispatch a promise. It's not going to work. But this does keep a reducer pure. That's one thing to note. If you're trying to stay Reduxy, that will keep your reducer pure. So yeah, by design, action creators are totally synchronous. You call the action creator, whatever it returns gets dispatched to the store. And yeah, dispatching a thing, you cannot dispatch a promise or anything like that, or a function that does anything. Not yet. So what people tend to do is, if you want to do async things and you want to use Redux, is you have sort of click handlers inside of your component. You kick off like a login start. So this will be this .props.login start is going to dispatch an action to our Redux store and say login has started. We'll have some other thing in a render function that like gives us a loading animation, something like that. And then we'll kick off a promise. And then in the then and the catch here, we'll dispatch different actions based on whether the login was a success or a failure. Or you'll handle your logic something like that. But now we're not really using Redux. We're kind of just moving it out of Redux, and we're writing more stuff in our React components. This is a disclaimer. This is completely fine. You can write React Redux like this. I wrote it for a long time like this. It's really nice. It's quite simple, and if you're comfortable with React and things like lifecycle methods and attaching click handlers, this is quite straightforward. It's easy to follow. And yeah, like you can write huge apps like this. It's not a problem. Definitely a thing that a lot of people do. But you can't cancel that request that you created. Yeah, fetch is uncancelable. So if you could write that with XML HTTP request, you'd have to take that and put it somewhere else when they click the cancel button and hold on to it. Yeah, it's going to get pretty ugly. Throttling and debouncing is also really hard. If you're going to do that inside of component lifecycle, oh yeah, so yeah, like I said, you can write that, but it's quite involved to write that. It's quite hard to test. And yeah, you often actually usually tie to component lifecycle, which means you tie to React rendering things in the DOM. If your components unmount and remount and you're doing a fetch in a component did mount, you're going to kick the fetch off twice. It's stuff like that. What we kind of want to do is stop doing things inside of our React components, leave them to just render. But basically, yeah, dispatching async actions or executing side effects in plain/vanilla Redux it's not hard. It's possible. You can test it and you can write it. It's JavaScript, but it's not intuitive. It's not like when Radosh was showing the examples of RxJS. It's really nice, right? That's intuitive. It's declarative, whatever word you want to use. So there's the concept of thunks. I'll quickly cover these because when someone says, how do you do async Redux, usually the first response is thunks. We're almost to observables, don't worry. So from the README on thunks, why do I need this? If you're not sure, you probably don't. Yeah, this talk is going to start to get quite technical. Just warning you, there's a huge disclaimer on all of this stuff. If you're not doing a bunch of async or not doing complicated async, then you're probably not going to need the kind of things that these libraries give you. But if you are, or if you're interested, this is really powerful and very cool. So not that section yet. So yeah, thunks are good. They're written by the guy that wrote Redux. They are his sort of recommendation in a way. He doesn't denounce the other libraries, but they're his implementation of doing doing async. Yeah, do these if you want a Redux way of doing side effects and not doing things like fetching inside of component lifecycle. So basic idea is you dispatch a thunk rather than an action. A thunk is a function that returns a function. What happens is the function that it returns is going to set up to take the dispatch for the store, and it will allow that function to dispatch as many actions as it wants. This is kind of a bit airy, doesn't really make a lot of sense. An example, your login thunk from before. So our login thunk, we kick this off. We dispatch this in the same way that we dispatch a normal action, but we sort of inject the middleware at the beginning when we set the store up for thunks, and then we can return this function that takes dispatch and then kick off our promise. I've actually missed a step in here. Above this fetch, you would kick off the login started action. And then we can do the same thing. We can dispatch our login success or login failure once it's finished. Cool. So thunks are quite nice. This is pretty minimal. Downsides are thunks don't know about other thunks. When you kick off one thunk, because then it makes cancelling and debouncing and throttling all these kinds of things quite difficult. You've got to hold on to state outside of your thunk or put it through your store or something horrible. If you do things like this, and you call set interval every second and you dispatch an unsolvable, yeah, like this is just going to run forever. It doesn't matter like whether someone navigates away or anything. Like this is just, the minute this kicks off, it's going to keep dispatching that action and you cannot stop it. Unless you, like I said, unless you store this somewhere else and clear it. So, Redux observable. Finally. So this was created by Jay Phelps and Ben Lesh. Jay Phelps works at Netflix. Ben Lesh, I think, worked at Netflix at some point, but now works at Google. This has a primitive or a core concept called an epic. Cool. This is really good. It's reminding me of everything. So an epic is a function which takes a stream of actions or an observable. They're interchangeable in my talk. I might drop in between one and the other. Takes an observable of actions and returns an observable of actions. Actions in and actions out. Yeah, if you like type signatures, there you go. Cool. So yeah, also worth noting here, it takes the store as well. You can access the store inside of your observable. They live outside of your, sort of after your reducer. If you dispatch an action, it will then go through all of your epics. So you can write multiple epics for different parts of your behavior. You'll see some examples later in the talk. So yeah, let's go back to our login example. So we've got three action creators for login started, successful, and failed. And we've got some types on them. And then we'll have a reducer somewhere else that can handle these and knows how to update our store or whatever to say, like, when login fails, we do something different, whatever. So this is an epic for doing logins. So we have an action stream that comes in. So action dollars are sort of a convention. If you put a dollar at the end, it's an observable of actions. So what we do first off is we say of type. This will filter all of the actions inside of that stream to only be for this action that gets dispatched. So every action goes through your every epic. And the first thing you'll do in almost every epic is say, I only want actions of a certain kind so I can deal with them individually. Then we switch map. So that's an operator that you saw from Rarish's talk. And what switch map will do is ensure that you only have one observable from inside here. Essentially, if you get multiple logins started, if actions kicked off, switch map will cancel the previous one and start a new one for you. It will ensure that happens, and it just sort of magically happens in the background. It's pretty nice. If you have questions about why that happens, ask Rarish. So, yeah. Oh, sorry, how that happens, rather. Yeah, we can pass whatever HTTP request data we want in. Notice here we have access to the action. So we can call action.username and action.password and pass those in our AJAX request. The AJAX operator here, or this is not, it is an operator, yeah. It creates a stream that will emit when the request finishes. And yeah, this takes an object kind of like fetch a little bit, basically, but not a promise, obviously. So this will map things to login successful, and if something fails, catch will, we need to make sure that, remember at the beginning when I said epics return an observable stream, catch will essentially return whatever gets thrown, so we need to convert that into a stream, so we create an observable of the login failed error if something goes wrong. Cool. Yeah, so yeah, we keep our React code simple. We can start using Rx and observables to easily add behavior, and we don't have to write our own implementations of things like, well, you'll see later, like canceling and debouncing, or if you've seen them from Rarish's talk. So, and yeah, our code gets even more React. Sorry, I hated that pun. I'm going to skip that. So, want it to be cancelable. Yeah, you saw. So we'll create an action for it. Login cancelled. And then, yeah, all we've done here is we've added a take until. So that was, again, it was in Raj's talk. And this will just kill the AJAX request inside of here, or sort of complete that observable if the login cancelled action appears. Cool. So if you want to do, if you're listening for scroll events and you want to debounce them, here you go. So fire a scroll event, fire this, dispatch an action with a type of scroll event fired, and have it set up as epic, and then a debounce time of 100, and then map them to an actual action that you want to call. That's it. That's like 3 lines, basically. 4 lines? We'll call it 4. So you want to throttle something? Very similar. I realized when I was writing this talk, I kept using the word throttle and debounce, not really knowing the difference. I was kind of reassured. This is the Ben Lesha I was talking about, who's a contributor to RxJS. Yeah, he submitted an issue a while ago that thinks he got them the wrong way around. The difference is, I'll just clear it up, throttle will allow something, if one thing happens, or something emits, it will happen at the same time, and then it will kick off a timer that will block anything else happening until it happens again, and then it will allow it to happen. Debounce will wait for something to happen, kick off a timer, and then not actually emit until after that timer is finished. So essentially, throttle, a debounce can take a while to finish if you've set quite a high value, whereas throttle will ensure that you never get any more values, any more than one value in your time value. So yeah, you can do things like polling pretty easily. Here you would have an action that got dispatched that maybe started polling, and then you could have a switch map again to ensure that you only had one observable from in here happening at one time. And yeah, every second, we could merge map and fire off an AJAX request to do our poll. That could map to something else, whatever you want. But you could also have a take and tow in here to stop polling. Notice what we've had to do is we've had to listen to the stream of actions that comes in again and filter based on here because we're now inside of another observable in there. But yeah, it's a tiny little bit more. I think that this is something I would find really difficult to write with pure plain Redux, and as well as test. And yeah, it's also kind of echoing what Raj was saying. This is really declarative. Once you get used to like the words merge map, switch map, yeah, they're really, really, really super nice to write. So yeah, creating your own observables. We mentioned the create rx.observable.create method. So this takes a function that will take an observer when you create. Here, this watch function is what you import out of. I think it's just like require fs and then, oh no, it's a library I think I use. But basically, this will watch a directory in Node or something, and then it will fire an on-change event whenever something inside that folder changes. And here, you just call observer.next whenever a file changes. You can see me using this observable in the next slide. But notice here, we just return, when we use this create function, we return a function that will close the observable. So we'll kill it off. All this means is that when we write an epic like this, kind of like the polling one, so we listen for an event, we switch map, and then we create an observable inside of it. We kick that observable off, we say take until we want to stop folder watching at some point, and then we just map those events that come out of that observable that we created to a file changed event and handle those in our UI however we want. Yeah. So, cool. This is, yeah, very complex and potentially heavy. It's not the better way. I wanted to make sure people got that point across, and it does add some complexity. It's very powerful and very nice to write. Like it feels quite satisfying to write code like this. But yeah, the testing story is pretty good. Like Ryder spoke about, you can use the marbles sort of syntax to write your tests. It does require a bit more setup because you've got to create a Redux store, set up the middleware, and all that kind of stuff. It is possible. It also feels really cumbersome because it's quite declarative. You don't really feel like you need to test as much. You feel like you're just describing what your code should do rather than writing an imperative style where you're not entirely sure it will work. And yeah, I think that's my last slide. So there's a talk. I'm not expecting you to remember that URL. There's a talk from Jay Phelps, sort of an introductory talk. It's really good because it has examples of things like debouncing and the vanilla JS implementation of them. So he's written both side by side. You can see how much code it requires and how much code time you're saving. And yeah, also the docs are really good. There's some more advanced stuff I've not shown here that I've never used, so I just left out. But you can create middleware, you can create epics on the fly and set them up and sort of turn them on and off and things like that. But I've not come across that. But yeah, that is my talk. Yeah, thanks. Have any questions? Yeah.
You always have to return an action from what was it?
So yeah, the description in the docs, you may have noticed, where did we say? Cool. This description said, a function which takes a stream of actions and returns a stream of actions, actions in, actions out. This is kind of a lie. The type signature kind of doesn't actually show you that. Okay, never mind. Basically, this takes an observable of actions. This observable can be of anything. It can just die instantly. It can do other things. All the key is that you only return one observable, and you return an observable. You can't return a string from your epic, because they're almost like observables that sit there for the entire length of your app and listen to actions and do things. Right? They're almost they're basically observables themselves. They're just a different name for them called epic. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Cool. Do you have any more questions?
We actually use this in Fandil. We kind of implemented our own version of this. And we're thinking of open sourcing it. And we do exactly that. We don't always return actions. And we use different signatures for it because we found that this is awesome for handling side effects, like pushing things to the data layer and things. Side effects are so cool because like side effects are very far from Redux. You don't want to store your analytics in Redux or anything related to it. So this is just perfect, and so we use it for cookies, for data layer, and yeah, when we sometimes return actions, but not always.
Yeah, because sometimes you make something to database, but you don't care about the response to that.
Yeah.
You just want to fire off the request.
Yeah, you can totally in some of the actions in the app that I was building, you can spin off multiple observables and then just merge them in and return them. And then your app has no idea that's happening. You've just got things happening in the background, sort of listening for changes or whatever. Any more questions?
Is there any real difference between this and Redux Saga?
So yeah, I nearly put a slide in for Saga and I forgot. Basically, I picked up Redux Observable after watching, I Googled it, found that talk, watched the talk, really liked it, then spoke with some friends who are using Sagas, started looking at Sagas, started looking at async iterators, didn't get them, just like a really difficult understanding of how they worked, came back to this, got observables a lot more, and I've started using this. Yeah, I would say Sagas, I believe, solved the same problem, slightly different style, but the same problem, different solution. You just have to understand async iterators, which is a whole kettle of other fish. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
Do observables have, do epics have access to the Redux state?
Yeah. Yeah, so each, you can see here, perfect. The store comes in. So I have a couple of actions where, I'm trying to think. I can show you a code example afterwards, but yeah, there's a couple of times where I think in the folder watch example that I was writing, I needed to pass the store into my folder watch observable so that I could do something else when a file, there's like a thing going on, but yeah, the store comes in and you can just access the store at the top level of your epic. It just comes in as a second argument.
But that seems a bit excessive, having access to the whole store. What we've normally done when we found the situation is combining the observable with another observable of the other parameter you depend on.
Okay.
So instead of having access to literally all the data of your application, you observe two streams and you combine them.
Are those streams of
Yeah.
actions, other actions?
Streams, we also, you can do it here. We do streams not only of actions, but also of selectors, which makes a lot of sense because sometimes an action can trigger multiple changes, but you actually only want to know when something becomes visible, and that's a selector. And so observing on that is very useful.
Cool.
I should have asked Radish actually, but are observable syntax sugar over complicated stuff
Yes.
like that, or there's nothing
Yeah.
there, right?
I did this talk at work, and someone who knows Scala was talking about, we had a conversation about functional programming, and basically they said that when it comes to immutable things in languages, almost all cool stuff like immutability and read-only things are implemented imperatively. So it's the same with Rx. It's all implemented with set timeout and XML HTTP request under the hood. You just don't have to know that. Yeah. Which is great because it means you can use it in all the places that those exist. You don't need to pull in other things and all that kind of stuff. With Redux Observable, you just need Rx.js.
You said it's expired after the reducer?
Yes. Yeah, so an action will travel through your reducer and change the store, and that changed store will get passed into the epic. It's essentially like, it's more, if an action gets dispatched and your epic immediately dispatches another action, the first one will have already passed through the store, is what is important to highlight. If they happen, I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure when by default middleware happens, but okay. Well, yeah. Then in that case, it does it reverse. I don't know how the implementation is, and then how it connects to the store, or how it connects via dispatching. But yeah, it's after the store, it's changed. Cool. Thanks.
We actually ask normally at the beginning if anyone is looking for a job or offering a job, but we forgot, so. Anyone? Yeah?
So in Geared Up at the moment, we're looking for a front-end developer.
For where, indeed?
Geared Up, is that
Geared Up, yeah.
Yep.
Geared Up. Yeah.
Represent. Yeah, so we're looking for a front-end developer, very much heavy JavaScript based. React
SaaS?
Yeah, well, SaaS, my day job for looking for web front-end developers and Scuttlebutt are looking for contributors.
Cool.
Anyone looking? Interested?
Harder to say.
Yeah.
Always.
Cool, good. The other thing is talks for the next meetups. Like we mentioned a lot of times, we're all involved in Code Your Future, and it's a project that it's coding, but has other sides like social sides and so on. And one of the things that we try to get is gender balance in the class and the mentors and so on. And React Edinburgh, we failed massively in that. We still haven't had a single talk from a lady. Sally is doing a talk the next time, but we need more people to. So if there is anyone who wants to do a talk, and we did this in a variety of ways. It doesn't have to be a full-on talk. We did lightning talks, short ones, longer ones, so on. So also workshops we had. So it's not it's a nice crowd in general, yeah. So I'm looking at you, Escobar people. But no, it's a nice crowd. So please, anyone who feels like doing a talk, please come and talk to one of us. Anything else? FanDuel is not looking for developers.
Not as eagerly as before, but yeah, we're still hiring.
Yeah. Anything else? And yeah, Code Your Future if you want to volunteer again. Even if you're Edinburgh based, there are students who are in Edinburgh, you cannot make it to Glasgow, you could help there, you can do online stuff. And it's also a great way to just learn, like especially when we get to more, we do React and we do Node, MongoDB, and it's a very good way to learn as well as teach. Scuttlebutt, you can get like first-hand support with Gordon. So yeah, please get in touch as well if you want to get involved.
Yeah, so even if you're entry level, there's several ways to help. Don't have to be a massive React.
Yeah. Cool. Great. I think some of us will go to the pub next door.
That one has
as usual.
closed.
Yeah. Seriously?
Number 8 has closed.
Yeah.
Why are we doing the meetup here then? Let's go.
We can go
We'll
to
find someone
Doctors.
else.
I don't know.
Yeah?
I don't know.
Doctors is closed.
I've lost my log.
Yeah.
Doctors is closed.
No, it's closed.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
No, it's not that bad.
Doctors.
Cool. See you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
See you.
Bye.
I was actually properly shocked.
Yeah, it's closed like a few weeks ago. I mean, it's very disappointing. Sorry?
Not mine.
Product Forge.
Product Forge.
It's a hackathon with a twist.
Yes.
Events like this are a superb way of extracting fantastic ideas from people with imagination, combining them with people who are doers and can make those ideas happen.
This is about finding the next step of innovation, moving into a digital age.
We just wanted to hear what other people could come up with and to help us think about how we do things in a different way.
I've come here to network and hopefully build something really, really cool.
For me, it's when you realise you've got ownership of a project where you realise it excites you.
We're really excited about the kind of ideas that people who are not maybe typically users or maybe not professionals will come up for us.
I didn't really know what to expect. One thing I'm really impressed about is the friendly atmosphere. The teams are collaborating and, there's competition, but it's friendly competition. I like the 3-day formats of being able to generate ideas, actually build up a prototype and then do a pitch. It's more than just technology. It's actually like, well, let's try and create something that could potentially be trialed and then go on and have a life after the event. I think is brilliant.
It's a brilliant experience. I'd recommend anyone to get involved, no matter what your skill level, what your skill set, there is something for everybody.